Approval of the agenda. I would love for a motion to approve.
A motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Motion for approval of the agenda by Mrs. Dillard and seconded by Mrs. McMurray. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote.
Dillard,
Yes.
McMurray,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes, and here.
Motion passed.
Did I not ask if you were
You
here?
totally did.
You did.
Sorry.
Okay,
But it's just,
Cindy.
Cindy was still in the other one, so that's why it was funny. You're good. Okay. Motion approved. Okay. First is number 2, new business. Tipp City Library tax budget. Recommend a motion to approve the 2025 tax budget for the Tipp City Library. I would love a motion.
All motion.
Moved by Mr. Thompson. I'll second. Seconded by Mrs. Dillard. And is there any discussion? Mr. Thompson?
There's none.
Mrs. Dillard?
No.
Move on.
No, ma'am.
All right, hearing none, we'll proceed to vote.
Thompson,
Yes.
Dillard,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
McMurray.
Yes.
Motion passes for the approval of the 2025 tax budget for the Tipp City Library. Next is resignation. A motion for the approval of the following resignations. It is listed in the board docs, certified staff as well as classified staff.
I'll motion.
Motion by Mrs. McMurray,
I'll second.
seconded by Mrs. Dillard. Write it. Mrs. McMurray, any discussion?
Nope.
Mrs. Dillard? No. Thompson? I just want to thank everybody for their service to our community in every aspect of whether it was teaching or being a part of the Board of Education office or whatever, but thank you for your work in our community. All right, we'll go ahead and vote.
McMurray,
Yes.
Dillard,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Administrative hiring. Let's see. This is a motion to, am I making a motion? It says action.
It's
So-
probably been copied in the wrong place. Give me one moment.
Okay,
Stop the meeting.
you're good. Is it under new hires?
I-
No, it's not.
Agenda.
Yeah, but there's no motion attached to it.
There isn't
so-
anything at all. It would just be recommend a motion for
For
approval of
approval
the administrative hire listed below, as listed below. I apologize for that not being there.
So could I just do it as a motion
You sure can.
to hire our Galen Gingrich as dean of students? Can I just do it that way?
Mhm.
Okay, would anyone like to make the motion to hire Mr. Galen Gingrich as dean of students?
All motion.
Motion by Mr. Thompson,
I'll second.
seconded by Mrs. Dillard. Any discussion?
I'd like to say that I think Galen will be great in this position. He knows a lot of the students and families from being at Nevin and then moving up, and he'll be in both buildings. So I just think it'll be a great position for him.
Great assistance for the principals in those buildings as well with the transition.
Who was the second on that? I apologize.
Mrs. Dillard,
Who was the first?
Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to echo what Angie said, I think with transition, with buildings being combined and some kids only having 1 year, Nevin Coppic coming over to Broadway is going to be a nice stabilization factor for them, but also I think they're going to need the extra administrative help. And he's a beloved member of the community. I don't think anybody's complaining that we found another new effective position. So
And I think at our last meeting, we discussed it too, how, you know, in all of our other buildings, we have some sort of an assistant principal, like in our middle school and high school for the same amount of grade bands. So I think it's just thinking ahead part for our districts. All right, we'll go ahead and vote.
Thompson,
yes.
Dillard,
Yes.
Drum.
Yeah.
McMurray.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Next is a motion for approval to employ the following certified staff for the 2025 school year, pending proper certification and paperwork. Listed below in board docs is the new certified staff hires for the district.
I'll move that we approve the action
I'll
to
second.
employ.
Okay, moved by Mrs. Dillard, seconded by Mrs. McMurray. To hire, to employ the following staff members for the 2025 school year pending proper certification and paperwork. Any discussion?
Just welcome to Tipp. Or welcome back.
All right, yeah, we'll go ahead and vote then.
Dillard,
Yes?
McMurray,
Yes.
Drum,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next is approval for the following bond resolution. It would be a motion for the approval of the following bond resolution. Bond resolution authorizing the issuance of bonds in the amount of not to exceed 70, what is that number? I can't read it.
78 million.
Thank you, $78,314,777 for the purpose of constructing, furnishing, and equipping a new pre-K 8 elementary school with related site improvements and appurtenances.
Appurtenances, I don't even know that word.
Thereto, including but not limited to sloped roof, floor finishes, and upgraded exterior materials, demolition of Nevin Coppic Elementary School and Tippecanoe Middle School, construction, furnishing, and equipping a bus garage with related site improvements, and that word again, constructing and improving new tennis courts, retiring existing
Indebtedness.
indebtedness in connection with the construction of certain public improvements and replacing existing equipment and constructing various permanent improvements school district-wide as necessary, and authorizing and approving related materials with
Matters.
matters, with the resolution attached.
I'll move.
Moved by Mrs. McMurray,
I was second.
seconded by Mr. Thompson, and I'm not reading again.
This is the selling of the bonds, correct?
Right.
Okay,
This is
the official
the
with
official
the
amount,
numbers.
correct, and we won't sell the bonds until final approval from the state commission,
After
controlling
August
board,
19th.
August 19th, yes. But we need the paperwork to
Absolutely.
get rolling on that, to prepare for that.
It's approximately 9 million less. Correct.
Correct, instead of the 87 million, it's 78 million, 300,000.
Any other questions? Discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed to vote.
McMurray,
Yes.
Thompson, Drum,
Yes.
Dillard.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next is an item of discussion, which is the cell phone policy. I believe that we have some papers on it, and there is a PDF attached in board documents as well.
So.
Go ahead.
As you know, late May, I believe, Governor DeWine signed the bill that required boards to require a cell phone policy. And we have one, but this is their model policy that they came out, it's on their website. I wanted to just have a discussion about that. We're not here to create the policies. I think there's some things that we need to talk about with community, with families with that. But I wanted to get a start and then see where we need to take it, because while it doesn't need to be done, officially till July of 2025, it doesn't mean we can't implement anything in October 1st or January 1st. We could create a policy that we are happy with. We can institute that at any time. So we just wanted to start that process. I know cell phones is social media, the mental health, all those things are becoming I guess issues that everybody has to deal with. So just wanted to get everybody's thoughts on this. So with this policy, that model policy, I'd like you to just to kind of read it. And then I want you to circle the things that make you think about something that, you know, that you might have an idea, or you want to learn more about. A yield sign or something that gives you pause, like, hey, we need to really research this a little bit more, how we might do something or how this might impact if we do X or Y. And then a stop sign is like, no, I don't agree with any of this. So if you go through there, again, a circle, things that get you, you know, you want to learn more about, you have questions on, a triangle for things that give you pause. How, you know, we really think this through, and a stop sign is really something that hey, I don't agree with, or doesn't make sense to me. What questions might you have?
I don't necessarily have a question. I just have a thought on this.
Yeah.
I feel like cell phones are part of the reason that there's so much of an issue with having tough conversations in general in society anymore. And so I think taking them out of the classroom and actually making the students have conversations will be positive in that way. I feel like there's a lot of, we want to text things, but we don't actually want to talk to people. So I'm okay with some of this. I can see issues with.
But and that's what I say. I want you to do it by yourself. So I want you to
okay,
I want you to read through this.
Question.
You
Okay.
mark it up how you want, and then we'll have a discussion after that.
Gotcha.
So take the time to go through that and mark it up how you'd like to mark it up. We'll have a discussion on those things. It's the same one as.
Yeah, the same one you said.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I read it earlier. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Moran is saying that I don't need to be here anymore, and is stating that he can end the meeting without me. Is the board amenable to having me exit the meeting at this time?
I mean, I'm sad you're leaving, Dave, but you can go.
Okay,
Is everybody else okay with that?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Jerome,
Yes, ma'am.
this is Murray. Are we voting?
No.
No.
So you're taking over.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Are you gonna take over? You gonna go? You gonna go keep track?
So
Okay.
give you about another minute maybe to go through this and get everybody's thoughts.
And I'll come with me.
Dave.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you, Dave.
Thank you, Stephen.
Enjoy the 4th of July, everyone.
Same to you.
We
You
will
too.
see you sooner than you think.
Ready? Okay, so, who would like to share let's start out with the triangles, things that gave you pause. Stiller, you're closest to me, go ahead. What did you have anything that gave you pause?
I did, so students are prohibited from using cell phones at all times. I think that's a little prohibitive. I think that we have a lot of parents who would agree with that, and we also think that there might be certain times that it's okay for kids to have cell phones, that before school starts, after school ends, maybe during a practice, getting a ride home, and also, of course, if there is some sort of, if they have access to it, during a very serious emergency situation. Do you know what I mean?
So
Like,
your concern is maybe not at school all the time, but just during school hours, maybe making sure that's open outside of the school, like the class hours type of thing, or before school, after school, you don't have an issue.
I think that there should be some language, their students are prohibited from using cell phones at all time, except including exceptions would include if there was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
language that includes exceptions.
Yeah,
So,
I think you're exactly right. There has to be some sort of exceptions to that.
so too restrictive in your mind.
100% yes.
I think this is a cultural, I think it's become a cultural thing in our everyday lives. And I think that the students, I put a yield sign next to it as well, the prohibiting, I think that allowing them, whether it's during lunch or recess or PBIS time, that they've earned it, or some sort of opportunity for them. I think that there's a lot of scientific data research that shows cell phone usage is very addictive and has addictive property traits involved with it. So I think that and parents want to communicate, the kids want to communicate, unless they go back to figuring out how to write notes in class to each other. I think that we're gonna need to start off with this a little bit. I was last in a classroom 3 years ago, and I will say that the cell phone usage was honestly one of the things that I struggled with as an educator, with the students staying off of it. One of the things that I put on here, we want students to fully engage. Sometimes colleagues I've seen, educational colleagues, will say, oh, we're going to use our phones for an activity. And I think as a district, if we have this policy in place, we need to make sure that we have the resources for the educators so that they don't need to rely on anything from the phone to utilize in class as an app or something along those lines. So I think that we need to keep that in mind, but I agree with Cindy. I think that there needs to be, but I also want to take it a little bit further and say, I think that there needs maybe a cell phone, like, break where you can check your phone, have access to it, things like that. I think the biggest piece with this, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be this, where it's secure and stored. Our lockers in the district do not have locks on them. And so, making sure that students, that is, a very expensive piece of property potentially for them. So making sure that it's stored, safely and appropriately, as to not be stolen or broken or anything along those lines. But also, I think the biggest piece where I'm anxious to work with representatives, not only parents from the community, but also students themselves and teachers, and I think future employers, what their expectations are of cell phone usage and how they can communicate to the students. That kind of goes along with that discipline piece. And I think that that's going to be huge in making sure that there is consistency and throughout the district, in every teaching classroom, in every building, et cetera, because when there's no consistency and there's no discipline, then you throw your hands up and say, well, if nobody else is enforcing it, then.
Kind of with Cindy in regards to the too restrictive, maybe with the use of cell phone being prohibiting it, you have some opportunities. Questions on how do we make sure security for storage and then discipline / consistency.
I'm sorry, let me just add in context, maybe I'll be the lone voice of dissent here, but I'm perfectly happy with the policy to restrict while they're on school property, because the way that I see it, and I know this would not be popular community-wide, and I don't expect to be in the majority of opinions here, but just for me, I'm thinking about any positive net benefit of a child having access or using a cell phone during school hours, and I can't think of one other than the one that's listed for them to possibly track or monitor a health concern. I have a colleague who has a daughter who is a severe diabetic, and she relies on that technology for blood sugar levels and all
yeah.
that. So I totally understand that case, but I don't, and I wanted to wait to hear the former educators who have been in the classroom much more recently than I have. I just don't see, from my perspective, any positive net benefit for a student having their cell phone. If there's an emergency, I feel like we have the system to where we can shoot out texts, emails, calls that can go out that can inform parents. I think when you do hand your child a cell phone, it's a pretty big responsibility for the kid. And the research has shown us it's basically at what age do you want to hand your kid an addiction? It's kind of
When it comes to
what you're saying for social media apps and things like that. So I'm one who's in favor of maybe the more restrictive end of this policy, but I understand that I might be in the minority for that.
So along that line, I think it also kind of depends grade level. I feel like there's some grade levels that this won't be an issue at all because like the kids aren't doing that, or if they do have them, they're just in their backpack for tracking purposes from a parent, right? So I think there's going to have to be some looking at it on different grade levels too when setting those expectations or what's moving, forward with that. As far as the discipline part of it, I think it's going to be an interesting process to monitor the discipline. And that's one of the ones that I paused at too, because I just feel like for so long, it's been something that's used in the classroom for, like, I know last year the kids were using it in the classroom for like using Yelp reviews in order to help them determine what was the best option between places for like something they were doing for a project. So how do you back away from that? You know what I'm saying? Like when you're using it in the classroom for educational purposes. And then you hit on the security part of it too. If the requirement is to keep it in backpacks, how do you monitor that someone doesn't take someone's phone, things like that? So I think there's a lot that we're going to have to look at when we look at this policy. It's not just going to be a clear black and white, this is what's going to happen. I think there's going to be a lot of variables in understanding how this is going to work.
I would also be interested in hearing directly from teachers,
Yeah.
especially in high school and middle school.
Me too.
And I would be interested in hearing from them their perspective on how many issues they experience that are directly tied to cell phones.
Yeah.
So for example, are there bullying issues that are tied directly to
Yes.
cell phones? If somebody who doesn't have a cell phone sees a kid who does have one, they come up and snag it out of their hand. If they have, there's like probably 100 different scenarios we can go over with that.
Yeah.
But I think I would want to hear from them specifically on maybe even a pros and cons list. Are there any net benefits
Right. Of having
in your classroom from having cell phones? Okay, now what are the problems with your children having cell phones in class? And then maybe that sets a baseline for us to create a policy, but who knows it better than they do?
Yeah, because they're in.
I have an idea. Kids might.
Well, that was our other
Kids might
idea.
know better.
The kids
Yeah,
do.
the kids are,
And I think that we should approach it, the way that this is written, it comes across to me as a kind of a deficit model. And that having a cell phone is a responsibility and a privilege. And that the way that this is written is all very negative, all of the consequences, and that we need to include a piece of it that highlights the positive aspects of earning the right to have a
Yeah.
cell phone at certain times. I also believe that whatever policy we put in place should be modeled by all of our staff.
absolutely.
It's, cell phones can be very distracting. Being a principal, it was just starting. You know, we had to figure out things. This wasn't in place. We had to start figuring out things, and kids are very, very smart. I had kids that already knew how, this is way back. They already knew how to make phone calls on their, it wasn't even a cell phone, it was like an iPod.
Right.
And kids are very smart, and kids would give us so much perspective on what the policy should be and cell phones have become such a part of our daily life that to ban them would be like, it's almost like a,
Well, they're tiny computers in our hand at all
right,
times.
it's just,
Mhm.
like tonight, I forgot my cell phone, almost turned around and drove back, but I was gonna be late. And I said, well, I can last 2 hours.
You think you can?
I mean,
Until somebody's like,
Right.
like, I know, I'm you're worrying, what if there's
Yeah.
an emergency or something, that's what I'm thinking,
Yeah.
but, I mean, I grew up with, landlines, and
Yes.
so I know that people can function without phones.
Yeah.
And I do think it's a huge distraction in the classroom, you've got 20, 25 kids in the classroom, they all have a cell phone, each one's getting dings for text messages or notifications or, that's just not a good environment at all.
It's
for
not,
learning.
and I think it's the engagement piece, and I can tell you again, as someone who is not too far removed from being in the classroom, that it was the engagement piece. Most of the time when I had to take a phone, it was because parents were texting their kiddos in the middle of the day to communicate.
Or the kid is texting to say, I don't feel good, so then the
So
parent
then the
comes to
parent-
school to pick them
Right.
up, and then the nurse is like, why are you here?
Right. I also think that there's gonna need to be some education along with it. But also our support staff in the offices, so if they don't have the phones and the parents are gonna start calling them, and they're gonna, there is gonna be increased communication then back to our front office staff, potentially, so I think making sure that we have proper communication methods, in place. I think that we have moved away from that. But I'm gonna add to that, I see
On the head.
people all the time, it's not just the phones. Now, okay, sorry, Glenn, I apologize, honey, but you can take your phone away, you still got his watch on.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I'm just saying, at what point I know this says cell phone, but you can call, text, communicate, all the things, a lot of things, with your digital devices, on your wrist. That is not what Ohio's policy is at this time, I understand that, but, so I think collecting data, I think collecting data from our teachers, our students, our parents. But I also think that the students need to hear from future employers, because I'm constantly hearing from employers that they cannot fulfill people holding jobs that they need to fulfill because their young employees cannot stay off their phones for extended periods of time. That is a concern because we are tasked with preparing our youth for future endeavors. And if that is something that is required for them not to be on their phone, maybe they're in healthcare within a patient's, room because that violates HIPAA and they're not focusing on the job, to where right now I'm working with a company that needs medical room cleaners, and it pays very well. They'll give them training and they don't have to have a college degree, but they cannot fill those positions because the students cannot have their phones. It's a issue with contaminants, and so they can't have their phone during their shift, and they quit at lunch because they've not had their phone for 4 hours and they can't handle it. So I think that not only this is actually a mental health issue as well, and I think an educational opportunity for our students, our staff, our administration, our parents, our community, our workforce, all of us working together. At the end of the day, what is actually best for kids and how are they going to learn appropriately, what they need to learn, helping them to focus on what they need to learn, and then preparing them for what's out there in the future.
I think that because it is such a ubiquitous part of daily life, that they're going, no matter what, at some point, they're going to be immersed in it. They're going to get a cell
Absolutely.
phone. Their parents have it or whatever. I'm almost coming at it from the perspective of, is it too much to strive for a bubble throughout the day that almost, I don't want to think of it as like a punishment type thing. That's not at all what I'm going for. What I'm saying is, if the problem is employers can't find kids that are engaged and locked in and focused, then wouldn't it be our job as educators to teach them how to do that and provide them a space where
Right.
we can say, hey, you're not going to be inundated with all of the digital distractions and the, digital crack, for lack of a better word, because it is that addictive. I mean, data is
That data.
definitive
Yes.
on that, and in some ways even more addictive
Yep.
than actual physical substances. So
Yep.
I'm almost looking at it as, hey, we can position our schools to be a place of respite from these things that no matter what happens, they're going to get access to them at some point. If our goal is to prepare them for what's next in life, wouldn't it be reasonable to assume that we could create a space where we could train them how to focus better and we could help them learn how to engage better without having this attached to them? Even all of us, besides
Except for
Cindy,
Cindy left hers at
my
home.
condolences, you left yours at home, but all of us have ours sitting
I left
Right.
it on
right
Saturday.
here, and you don't
It
even
was
think,
awesome.
you don't even think about it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're all locked into this thing, but our concern is for the next generation, and we've seen the troubling trends that are arising due to this little device. So I just think it takes some sober consideration on our part to think, not lean into the skid and say, even how can we properly harness it? Because again, to my, I guess from my perception, there's very, very little net benefit to cell phone usage in school, and there's a whole lot of negatives.
I think the districts who have gone ahead and proactively adopted policies, I think that it would behoove us to communicate with them. I have been reading articles that have been out on OSBA as well as other sites that have talked about districts who have varying levels of policies. I would like to, see some of their data as well and talk to them about what's working, what's not working, their challenges and things. So again, this is a cultural shift now, and it's going to take some time. So I am glad that we will be involving all of the players in this to create this policy. But again, at the end of the day, I think it go back to, we have to, at least to gather data. We can't just say, well, we're gonna start off with this discipline or upholding this policy at the beginning of the year, and then by the end of the year, it's a free for all. And we need to uphold the policy and collect the data and then evaluate and potentially update, change, whatever, but we have to maintain, and that's gonna take some training.
And I think this is gonna be an ever evolving thing for right now too, as we navigate it, so.
I'm interested in your perspective,
Yeah.
because you probably hear about this from principals and teachers and all that stuff. What's your general feeling on this policy?
More of it, I think there's a lot of distractions.
Mhm.
It's easy distractions for kids. And I don't think they're necessarily good distractions. I think that, instant gratification
Absolutely.
and stuff. That's what the social media places, things do,
Yeah.
right? They try to hook you in.
Yeah.
And they know the algorithms, they know what
Yes.
they're doing. But it's for money.
Right.
Money for, yeah.
Mhm.
So I think we have to be reasonable with it. I think,
Right.
saying we're not gonna have technology or things like that is,
Right.
not reasonable, but I think involving parents, families, students,
Mhm.
employers, staff involved to really think this through, to make sure that we're doing it in a way that makes sense, it's easily understood. We just need to start that process.
Absolutely.
So that's,
And what is that timeline, and what are you envisioning? I know we have.
I think it's really gonna happen at the beginning of the year,
Mhm.
beginning of the school year. I think we have to wait to do something now.
Oh, yeah.
Might be too much.
Yeah.
Right.
The people that want to be
Absolutely.
involved. I think when we start getting involved again, using the parent groups, using some community sessions, using some different ways to have some opportunities for people to have input and gather thoughts. But staff's gonna be a big one. again,
Right.
they're the ones that are gonna have to
Right, administer.
enforce it,
Mhm.
so to speak. And I think there is an engagement piece to that as well.
I think we can craft a poll if we wanted to through Google Docs or SurveyMonkey or something like that, all the email addresses that we
I
have on
know,
file.
but the problem is sometimes people just don't, fill them out. I guess it's the same.
Same
with
thing, somebody
public
shows up.
meetings.
Oh,
I know
right.
that too,
Yeah.
just,
If it's important, they'll fill out the survey, they will, at least the community knows it's coming. So maybe, they'll fill out
I
the
think
survey,
there's,
they'll
I think
be
there's things to
involved.
consider when you're looking
Right.
at
Yeah,
surveys,
absolutely.
things like that.
I think also too, the accessibility piece. I remember when one of my kiddos, they were like, well, I'm the only, this was fifth grade, I'm the only one that doesn't have a phone. I'm like, no way. And I chaperoned a field trip. We went to Cosi and I felt like my kid was the only one without a cell phone. And, we're on a field trip and kids were on their phones the whole time, at Cosi. And I know I told my group that I was with, I'm like, put them away in your pocket. I don't want to see them. We're gonna go have fun. I want you to be engaged. And so, I think that,
It almost creates an
My-
unnecessary like social class.
yes.
That's-
yeah, my kiddo
Artificial.
definitely felt out of it because he didn't have a phone and I did not realize, I didn't go run out and buy him a phone or anything like
No.
that. But I definitely think that, there is, and depending, apps cost money, things cost money. Again, I come back to that. I don't think if it's something for educational purposes, that the students should have to pay to download an app on their
Oh, yeah.
phone or anything like that. I think that that's something that, that's part of
Oh, we got
supplies,
Chromebooks, right?
exactly,
Yeah,
and we
there's
have our
Chromebooks and all
Chromebooks
that,
and they
yeah.
need to be
Yeah, we can figure those things out.
using
Yeah.
that, so.
And
I just wanted to mention a couple other things. I think this policy is personally, I think this policy, this model policy is lacking quite a few things.
Oh,
yeah.
And I think that it doesn't include any of the legal aspect.
No.
I think that there needs to be disclaimers of the district if we're gonna be collecting cell
Yeah.
phones, there needs to be disclaimers. I also think that the progressive discipline should be less than more, because the more steps you have, the more people are involved, the less likely it's gonna be consistent.
Mhm.
So I think that there's a lot of,
Want to dive into.
instead of research, it should be our belief system here in Tipp schools about education in general. So I think that we can look to other districts look at other cell phone policies and come up with a cell phone policy that's really unique for our school district and that really represents our values here.
Mhm.
Also,
Great.
so just, again, wanted to make sure you had this information and we'll get moving on, when school starts up to provide some opportunities and think about how to make sure we're getting people's thoughts and to create or update the policy to the needs we want.
Absolutely.
What questions might people have? Anything on here that was like, no go, this is dealing with any of it?
I just felt like it's gonna be rolling. There's gonna be things we don't like that we do like. It's just gonna be rolling as we go through it.
And I've read some of the articles in the paper, the expense that some of these districts are
Correct.
using to pay for these.
Yeah. Bags and things, yeah.
It seems ridiculous, the cost that's involved. I mean, West Carrollton and Springfield both, I think, invested, it was a lot of
A
money.
lot of money, and I that was the only other thing I was gonna say is, I think we need to keep the costs in mind. What is the least prohibitive, but also, financially, prohibitive financially, so.
Maybe I'm special, but I swore that we used to have like cell phone pockets and the kids had a
Yeah,
number and
I
they
did.
would put their
It was
thing
in
in, right?
The shoe-
Calculator.
The shoe,
Yeah.
you put it down.
So I guess I got confused as to when that dropped off. I don't know, whatever, I'm old, it's fine. I accept
Again,
it.
I know that there are certain staff that are still using them, you know, in the classroom. When the kids walk in, they have to put the phones
Yeah.
in the pockets, but then others aren't. And so again, you know, it's a consistency
Thing,
well.
okay.
All right,
Alright,
thank you.
fantastic.
Mhm.
Thanks. Okay, next is our upcoming meetings. So, our next regular Board of Education meeting will occur on July 16th at the Tipp High School Media Center, beginning at 6 p.m. And then the next work session will occur on August 6th, 2024 at the Board of Education, beginning at 6 p.m. All right, at this time, I would love a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Mrs. McMurray and seconded by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote.
All right, Mr. McMurray,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Ms. Dillard,
Yes.
Mrs. Drum.
Yes. All right, motion passes. The time is now 6:42 and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.